Hello and welcome to the oddschecker Champions League preview podcast and video. It is the 30th of July and we're previewing the Champions League knockout ties. It's that kind of year, that kind of season, nearly a year since it all started. And I'm joined by WhoScored's very own Martin Laurence and football writer and editor of The Blizzard, Jonathan Wilson, who are going to be coming up with their pearls of wisdom across the knockout ties in store this week to try and find some value. Thank you very much for you two for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Cheers. Thank you.
So let's just start at the beginning, I guess, because it was so long ago that we last saw Champions League football that you can't really begrudge people if they have absolutely no idea what games are coming up, who's playing, what the situation is. So I'm quickly, before I come to you guys, just going to run through where exactly we are. The last day of Champions League football was on Wednesday, March the 11th, which saw Liverpool knocked out by Atletico Madrid, PSG going through at the expense of Borussia Dortmund, Leipzig thrashing Spurs in Germany, and Atalanta winning on aggregate 8-4 over Valencia. So there are four confirmed quarterfinalists. But what we're coming up with this week and what we're going to be previewing here are the second legs of the other half of the round of 16, which saw Lyon beating Juventus 1-0, Manchester City beating Madrid in Madrid 2-1, Bayern Munich thrashing Chelsea at the Bridge 3-0, and Napoli and Barcelona drawing 1-1. And, you know, you may not really understand when. You might have heard about Lisbon and a festival of football coming up, but these second legs are being played behind closed doors at the stadium where they were meant to be played, providing that is possible. So we're not quite in Lisbon yet, sadly. But we're going to start at the top. And one of the first games we're going to be seeing, which is on Friday evening, and it sees Manchester City hosting Real Madrid. And City are short price favourites for the tie. They're 8-11. Real Madrid 18-5, and the draw just over 7-2. And anybody who, you know, like me, follows a bit of La Liga, watches a bit of City as well, will think, you know, 1-goal advantage for Manchester City coming into this tie, even though they're at home, still feels fairly precarious, especially when you're thinking about Zinedine Zidane's Real Madrid. But the odds suggests otherwise. 2-13 best price. The Sporting bet that Man City qualify through the tie. Real Madrid 11-2, which would suggest that Madrid don't come into this in their best form. But Jonathan, they've just won La Liga. So what am I missing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the game had been played in March, it would have been pretty straightforward for City. But I think what we've seen since football began again is this Real Madrid. They've been very good defensively. I think a lot of the issues they had in that regard have been sorted out. Thibaut Courtois, who had a very shaky start to time in Madrid, suddenly looks a commanding goalkeeper again. You can see a proper structure there about Madrid. They're not a particularly exciting team at the moment. They're not a thrilling team. But they, you know, even when they were winning Champions Leagues, I think they weren't sort of in the mould of Real Madrid of the late 50s. They were quite a functional team, albeit with brilliant players. And they seem to have got that winning mentality back. I guess the big thing against them in this tie is the absence of Sergio Ramos.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramos sent off in that first leg, and you mentioned how solid they've been defensively. He's also popped up with a fair few goals since the break, and certainly his absence will be felt. But Martin, when you look at this tie and you look at the odds, are you surprised to see City so short, or do you think this should be fairly straightforward for them?
I'd say I'm surprised. I would definitely have them as favourites. But yeah, I wouldn't see them that short. I just think, like Jonathan says, I think the absence of Ramos is really key. I just feel like it's probably going to be Eder Militao who comes in. He's a good young centre-back, but obviously nowhere near the experience of Ramos. Real Madrid have failed to win 4 of the 10 matches Militao has started this season. So yeah, that's not an adequate replacement as it stands. He may well be in the future. But yeah, like you say, Ramos, even for goals, it's been a remarkable season, and obviously everyone will point to the fact that he takes penalties. He scored 6 of those. He still scored 5 goals, like non-penalty goals, 11 goals from centre-back. It's only him and Karim Benzema who scored more than 4 in La Liga for Real Madrid, and that shows, I guess, what Jonathan's saying, in that they're a much more functional side now, and also that they're now heavily reliant on Karim Benzema, who's probably had his best season, if not ever, at Real Madrid than for many years. He's been outstanding. They've only scored 70 goals, which for a title-winning team is incredibly low. They only scored 63 last season, and obviously you look at the sort of loss of Ronaldo, as the turning point. They scored 100+ goals in all but one season with Ronaldo. So the drop off is massive. So there's a massive shift in what Real Madrid actually are now. And like Jonathan says, only 25 goals conceded in the league, and that's really how they won the title this season.
Two sides who certainly like to dominate possession, especially the way the City's high intensity play. But even in the first leg, I think both teams completed over 450 passes in the game. Given what's at stake here, obviously Madrid have to try and take the game to City. So in terms of a tactical battle, Jonathan, how do we expect this one to play out?
Well, I'm not sure they will take the game to City, certainly in the first half, maybe even the first hour. I think if you look at City defensively, and this has been a problem all season, and the reason they've lost, they lost 9 league games this season, the reason that they've looked defensively suspect is on the counter. So if Real Madrid can sort of lure City forward, which I think won't actually be that hard because that's just how City play, then I think City are really vulnerable. What we've really seen with City this season, and I'm not sure whether it's an issue of personnel. They obviously didn't replace Vincent Kompany. They had the injury to Laporte, Stones, and Otamendi haven't been in. The doubts we had about them have not been resolved. So it may simply be an issue of personnel. But I do wonder with Guardiola, what we saw in 2009, 2011, that sort of 3-season period, it was a new style of football. We'd never seen anything like that before. And then the tendency then was to focus on the possession. But I actually think the pressing was at least as significant. And I remember Alex Ferguson after the 2011 final saying he'd never felt in a game his team had been so unable just to keep the ball. And I guess the two to go together. That when if the opposition is so good at keeping the ball, then when you have the ball, it puts great pressure on you because when you lose it, you're not going to get it back. But they were brilliant at pressing. And what we've really seen, I think, in the 9 years since, is repeatedly Guardiola's sides, when they have lost, it has been to actually quite simple balls in behind them. That if you can beat the press, you have a chance against them. And that glass jaw that I think has always been lurking there has become massively pronounced this season. And that, I think, is a huge problem for City in terms of winning the Champions League. That every side will look at how Chelsea played against them, for instance, in the game where the title ended up being decided. That Chelsea were played off a park for 20, 25 minutes. And then the second half, simple balls in behind City's defence kept creating chances. So Real Madrid will look at that and think, we don't actually have to do anything for an hour. It's almost like when Arsenal went to Liverpool in '89, the George Graham thing of, if we're still in this at half time, and then if we can get a goal, they will be rattled. So I think this is actually a really fascinating game. The problem for Madrid is they do have to score twice. And whether they'll be able to create enough to do that, whether they have enough pace through midfield to really unsettle City, I don't know. But I think it's going to, I think it will be a really close, tense occasion.
Certainly seems to be a blueprint over the course of the season and how to beat City. And we've seen obviously Manchester United do it a couple of times as well. Sides who can spring on the counter and get in behind Madrid. Just quickly, Jonathan, you mentioned Pep's style of play, and it's interesting to note here we've got two managers in Guardiola and Zidane. Two of the most decorated managers in the game. Zidane, obviously, with a Champions League record at Madrid, and Pep at Barcelona, at Bayern Munich, and now at City. Pep Guardiola gets a lot of credit for his management style, whereas the general conversation around Zidane seems to be that his achievements are less down to his tactical nous. But do we know how these matchups between these two managers generally go or have gone in the past?
I'm not sure they've ever played each other before, have they? I can't think of an
occasion. Is this tie
the
first? Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. Zidane, I guess we like our managers now to have a philosophy and to be very sort of eloquent in explaining that. And Jurgen Klopp clearly is very good at that. Guardiola is very good at that. Zidane, in Spain, there was a tendency, certainly early on at Madrid, to dismiss him as a clappy hand manager, that he didn't actually do anything other than sort of make the players feel good about themselves. I think it's actually slightly more complicated than that. But if you look at Zidane, you look at the teams where he was really successful. Okay, there's Real Madrid, there was the Galacticos period, when they weren't that successful. And I think the interesting thing about that team is Zidane was clearly quite frustrated about it. If you think of the comments he made when Makelele left, he was very aware of the need for defensive solidity. If you look at when he won the World Cup with France in '98 under Jacquet, a very defensively solid team. You look at the Juve side he played in, again under Lippi, a very defensively solid team. So actually, his formative influences are defensive solidity, keep it tight, and if you have 2 or 3 brilliant players, things will happen. And that's how they won those 3 Champions Leagues in a row. They weren't particularly great to watch. There was no sense of this is taking football into a new tactical dimension. And maybe because we got so used to the tactical conversation being about these overarching philosophies, maybe we didn't quite appreciate how well he organised the defences. And I think the other thing that really stood out about his management when they won those 3 successive Champions Leagues was how effective his substitutions often were, which suggests that the idea he wasn't doing anything and just sort of standing on the sideline clapping is fallacious, that he was very good at working out how a game was going and making the requisite changes. So he's sort of, I think, a slightly old-fashioned manager in that it's about organisation, it's about not letting things slip, it's about motivation, it's about making the right changes at the right time. It's not about putting some theory into practice on the pitch.
Interesting. I remember that Champions League final, the Atleti game, remember Atletico, where he basically Simeone, they just dropped in very deep. They frustrated them and they broke on the counter. And maybe we could see a similar performance here. Going to push you both for a prediction. So Martin, coming to you first, how do you reckon this game will go? What do you reckon will be if you don't have to give me a score necessarily, but do you reckon there'll be goals? Do you reckon we'll see Madrid doing a job over City?
I don't on the latter. I think Karim Benzema has to have a great game for Real Madrid to get the result they need here. Like Jonathan says, they really need 2 goals, and this Real Madrid side aren't particularly well back to do that against Man City, I wouldn't say. But I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game. And yeah, Jonathan's convinced me. Basically, I do think it'll be a tense game, and I'd go for an under 2.5 if I was going to have a little bet. And I think there'll be value in that as well.
Yeah, it's a massive price, 7-4. Normally, you're seeing unders probably being just about favourite in games, maybe not in the Champions League, but 7-4. Under 2.5 goals. That is best price for Bet365. It is as short as 6-4 elsewhere. As ever, make sure you download the oddschecker app for all of the best prices. Jonathan, what do you? I'm guessing you're going to kind of side with Martin there about it being a pretty cagey, low goal scoring affair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is the potential that if Real Madrid get an early goal, it could go, like the City Monaco games, it could be 5-3 or something. But and I think if Ramos had been there, his threat from set plays is such. You could see Real Madrid really putting pressure on City of nicking a goal and getting a couple of corners late on, and there's a bit of panic sets in. But I think City will probably. I think the loss of Aguero is huge for them as well. That he has that sort of sharpness to. He needs fewer chances to score a goal than Gabriel Jesus. Put it that way. So yeah, I can see this being sort of a tight, cagey 1-1, something like that.
Tight cagey 1-1. Yeah, go on. Martin.
Sorry, I think the point on Aguero is really interesting. Obviously, he didn't play the first leg. He was out of the first leg as well, and they played Bernardo Silva as a false 9. And this will just be really interesting for Gabriel Jesus, I think, in terms of do we really get to see what Pep Guardiola thinks of Gabriel Jesus here, like whether he's the answer post Aguero, whether he gets the nod. Will be interesting. That's one of the sort of selection dilemmas that I'll be looking out for.
Yeah, I can't work Gabriel Jesus out. There's a large part of me thinks he's sort of a B+ player who'll never quite step up. But equally, there's part of me thinks he could score 40 goals next season and it wouldn't be that much of a surprise. You see sometimes with players in the mid-20s, I mean, Mohamed Salah, I guess, is the best example. Suddenly they work out how to score goals and it becomes really easy for them. And he could make that kind of progression, or this might be it. And I don't know which is the case.
Big couple of weeks for him to, he's leading the line for the favourites for the whole competition in the absence of Aguero. As you mentioned, 5-3, Jonathan, I'm going to say the price just so you can claim it if it does turn out to be the case. 150-1, about 5-3. 1-1 you also mentioned as well, which is 17-2. as short as 13-2 elsewhere, 17-2 again with Bet365. And in the first goal scorer market, we have Gabriel Jesus is the 9-2 favourite. So that covers off a game that I'm still saying is in the balance, despite City being prohibitively short price favourites to qualify, onto a game now where I think we'll lose our credibility if we say this one is still open. Bayern Munich hosting Chelsea. This is it's 3-0 on aggregate going into the game after Bayern doing an absolute job on Chelsea in the first leg. Bayern are 1-100 to qualify from this one. Chelsea 50-1 to qualify. And Martin, it's pretty hard to argue with that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just Chelsea don't keep a clean sheet in that game, so this isn't a game where they need 3 or 4 goals. It's probably a game where they'd need 5 or 6 to actually qualify.
I mean, that 5-3 is probably about as likely as 0-0.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting game just in the case of, like, as a neutral. If you want to watch goals and you want to watch a fun game, this should be a fun game, but it's also the least interesting game of the sort of second legs, just because it is cut and dry. It's done. In my opinion, I can't make any stats case otherwise. But it'll be fun. It should be fun.
But I mean, we have seen, and I know this is massively clutching at straws, but we have seen in the Champions League in the last couple of years some extraordinary stories. We've also seen Chelsea this season in this competition, react to adversity in a pretty special way. I mean, is there something we could say maybe about Frank Lampard and his desire to prove himself? I mean, he'd have been smarting. He'd have been hurt after that first leg. Is this, even if they go out, he'll want to go out fighting and prove that they're not going to, just be played off the park by Bayern again?
Yeah, I think in terms of the thing that Frank Lampard has managed to prove above anything else is that he can manage big games. He's done that well. Obviously, the reverse leg wasn't a case in point of that, but like in the league and in the domestic cups, he's done that well. So I don't think he's got a lot to answer for there. But it's with Chelsea, it comes down to one thing, and that's their defence and their goalkeeper. And they haven't kept a clean sheet.
Which one?
Yeah, that's another talking point. But they haven't kept a clean sheet away from Stamford Bridge in the league all year. Like it's in the calendar year. And they actually conceded the most goals away from home post lockdown in the entire league. They conceded 14 goals away from home, and obviously, I know the home advantage sort of thing is a bit scrapped here, but they're still away from Stamford Bridge, and that still seems to be affecting them.
So what you're saying is through natural variance, it's about time they kept an away clean sheet. Is that the?
Yeah, they're due a clean sheet, I guess. Yeah.
Jonathan, can you jet us up any other way? I mean, I'll run through quickly the match odds. Bayern are 4-9 to win the game, the draw 4-1, and Chelsea 6-1. Is there any way you can jet us up to give any Chelsea fans hope, or is it a case of tune in if you just want to see some goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 massive problems there for Chelsea. Which is if they are taking this seriously as a game where they want to try and get through, they have to attack, and that expose them to the counter-attack. Now, they've conceded more goals on the counter than any other team in the Premier League this season. Lampard's Derby last season conceded a high proportion of goals on the counter than any other side. Lampard cannot defend against the counter. You look at Bayern, you look at the pace of Gnabry, Alphonso Davies coming down the left. They're a really, really good counter-attacking team. Lewandowski is the ideal forward to play on the counter, hold the ball up and lay it off. It's impossible to see Chelsea keeping a clean sheet here. And it could be really humiliating because of the other reason, which is that under normal circumstances, Bayern would have league games going on at this time, and they'd be quite happy to rest players and take it easy. Well, they haven't played a league game for 3 weeks, and they've got the quarterfinals coming up in Lisbon the week after, so they have to get some fitness. So they logically, at least for an hour or so, will play this hard. So I can see this being pretty embarrassing for Chelsea, especially given presumably their players are sort of thinking this is a bit of hiding nothing here. And the point about Kepa is, I mean, I've been, I think, more critical of Lampard than a lot of people this season, which doesn't mean I hate Lampard, just to be clear about that. I just have certain doubts. But Kepa has made it sort of impossible for him, because Kepa has let in a higher proportion of shots on target than any other keeper in the history of this stat being collected, which Opta began collecting these stats in 2003. There's no keeper has been so porous as him. I think he lets in. I think it's around about 45% of shots on target he lets in. So, if you have 9 shots in the game, you're going to score 4 goals.
Yeah. Claudio Bravo would be proud of those stats, I think, as well. But it's certainly difficult this for Chelsea. I mean, I would say even last season at Derby, Lampard does have a way of lifting his players. And so it's going to be an interesting first 15, 20 minutes. I'm not in no way suggesting Chelsea come back into this at all, but I do think they will come out swinging, let's say. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, though, as Jonathan says, in terms of the tactical battle, because that will leave them very vulnerable. We'll just mention the goal lines here. Over 2.5 is predictably short at 4-9. But over 3.5 is a shade of odds against, about 21 to 20. So if you do want to back goals, that does seem a way to go. Over 4.5, so 5 goals or more, 13 to 5. But it does seem like the writing is probably on the wall here for Chelsea in a season or in the past couple of years where we've seen so much drama in the Champions League. I'm pretty sure we can say that this will be the most dramatic comeback of the lot. Although I did watch Istanbul yesterday on ITV4, so that got me dreaming for Chelsea fans that we could see another 3-goal comeback, but pretty unlikely. On now to the games that don't have English representation, and the tightest of the lot sees Juventus against Lyon on Friday night, and Juventus are just about favourites to qualify here. 6-7, that famous price, 6-7 best price to qualify. Lyon around about 11-10. Lyon won the game in France 1-0, and I'm guessing a lot of people watching and listening to this, Jonathan, won't have been following Serie A or League very much. So what kind of form do these come into this game in?
Well, I mean, Lyon, we've kind of got no idea. There's the Coupe de la Ligue final they'll have played, but that's it since lockdown 3 months ago. So I think that's a big problem for Lyon, that they just have had no competitive football. On the other hand, they've been able to prepare for this. Even before lockdown, their form wasn't great in France. Only just. They didn't qualify for Europa League, did they? They missed out on the final weekend. It was a major surprise they won that first leg, and it was a little bit of a smash and grab. Juve have won Serie A, but I think they've done it in incredibly unconvincing style, and they've basically won it because the other challengers have had even worse forms since lockdown. I think Juve. I sort of think the status of Juve, and I guess this also applies to Barcelona, we'll come on to at the minute, shows everything that is wrong about the economics of modern football. So Juve have essentially got bored of winning Serie A. They manage having won 4 doubles in 5 years in the league in the other year, because they think Allegri is not going to win them the Champions League, even though he's got to 2 finals. And they bring in Sarri, and they go, okay, well, we've seen Sarri's Napoli playing this brilliant, expansive, fluid, modern football, and it didn't go so well at Chelsea. But his Napoli, there was evidence he could do it in Serie A, so it was a logical appointment. But the problem is their other massive gamble to win the Champions League is still at the club, which is Ronaldo. And Ronaldo is clearly still a brilliant footballer, 31 goals this season. But he's also a static footballer. He doesn't move. Even when he was at his absolute peak, he never pressed. That's why Alex Ferguson ended up playing him through the middle and playing Rooney on the wing in 2007-8 in the Champions League, because you couldn't rely on Ronaldo to track his fullback. So you cannot play Sarri football with Ronaldo. You cannot play Ronaldo football with Sarri. So it's just a very simple measure of how disconnected that team is, how everything just goes through Ronaldo. He's got 31 goals. Dybala's got what, I think 14, mid-teens anyway this season. Higuain's got 7. Nobody else got more than 3. Nobody's getting any goals from midfield. And you look back to this Napoli side when they had that incredibly fluid front line of Insigne and Callahan and Dries Mertens, and you had Marek Hamšík breaking from midfield and scoring 6 or 7 goals a season. You had Zielinski or Allen breaking forward. You had the 2 fullbacks pushing on. They were creating opportunities, creating goals from everywhere. Juve, just everything goes through Ronaldo, and it's so predictable and so static and so slow that the fact that they still, favourites to get to the last 8 of the Champions League is just the rich are so insulated from the consequences of any mismanagement that, I don't know, there's something vaguely, it's just wrong. It's a sign of football's decadence.
What an impassioned speech. I couldn't agree more. Juventus, Martin, as Jonathan's touched on there, seemed to be the least praised Scudetto winner for a long time. Everything, I don't watch much Serie A, but everything I read about it, everything I see people talking about this Juventus team kind of echoes what Jonathan says there. Just not really much to get excited about whatsoever.
Yeah, so there's a clear sense that the tide is turning in Italy, if it hasn't already turned. You've got Atalanta there, who are just the sweethearts, basically, of the nation and of the neutral, basically. And Juventus are so opposite that right now. They've won their 9th Scudetto running, despite stuttering over the line, like Jonathan says. It's one of their worst runs of results in recent memory. And they've won the league without topping any real metric, any raw metric. They're not top for goals, they're not top for goals conceded, they're not top for shots conceded, possession, pass accuracy. And that just points to Jonathan's point about this just being so much through one man, so much through Ronaldo. And Dybala to a lesser extent, who, it should be said, has been very, very good post-lockdown. But again, I can only echo the sentiments of Jonathan. When you look beyond those players and further back, particularly, and into the midfield, there's a real problem there. They're not an elite team by any means anymore. And Miralem Pjanic, who's been one of the best players in Italy for a number of years, hasn't had his best season and is now leaving. So how they replace him is a big deal. But yeah, this isn't a dominant side in Italy anymore, despite how weird that sounds, having just won their ninth title in a row. So this is an intriguing game. I still think the fact that Lyon haven't played football in months is the defining factor here, and why it makes Juventus probably a good price. They would be favourites normally anyway, but for that reason, I just think that's a very good value bet for Juventus to go through. But beyond that, I don't see them getting anywhere.
So back Juventus here, and then get against them in the future. Yeah, 10 to 11 actually each side now in places. So you can get 10 to 11 Juventus to qualify again with Bet365. Anything to note, Martin, from your end about Lyon? You said that as obviously they haven't played for a long time, but any kind of players or dangers that we could see them posing to Juve?
Hussein has had a very good season, and I think the signing of Bruno Guimaraes.
Lovely pronunciation.
Yeah, well, that's a guess, to be honest. He's a very promising player and had made a very good start. So they've made good acquisitions. They're losing Lucas Toussaint to Hertha in the summer, but he obviously scored the goal in the reverse leg, which is a very rare goal for him. They've got good young players, but it's impossible to read anything into what form they'll come into this game in. So yeah, it's a tough one to make a case for Lyon, but at the same time, I don't see Juventus running away with it by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lyon need to score. I can see them going through on away goals, but the idea that they can keep it at 0-0, I think, is unlikely.
Cristiano Ronaldo is 23-10 to score the first goal. Always Ronaldo. A very short price in that market indeed. And, as Jonathan said, goals not coming from many other places in that side. So that is probably makes sense, but it feels like Juve might have got lucky with their draw here rather than anything else. We'll move on to the fourth game on Saturday evening, the fourth tie, I should say, over the weekend. And that sees Barcelona hosting Napoli. Barca for the match are 8-11, 16-5 to draw. Napoli 17-4. And in the to qualify market, we have Barcelona are 2-5 favourites and Napoli 11-5. You mentioned, Jonathan, a second ago, Sarri's Napoli. And it's fair to say probably that these are two sides who are looking, only shades of their former past recent glories.
Yes, which I think for Napoli is more forgivable. Just in terms of budget, they're clearly going to, there's going to be waves of success and less success, and they have improved since Christmas. That's clearly the case. But Barca just, I mean, the amount of money they've wasted is extraordinary over the last 2 or 3 years, and again the fact that they're probably going to get to the quarterfinal of the Champions League and they're going to get all the money that entails, it just sort of that's just why or how football is broken. That again, you have a manager who's won 2 league titles in a row. You're top of the league, but you decide almost on a whim that this isn't really working. We're not going to win the Champions League this season. So we better get rid of him, rather than looking at the fact that the midfield has been dysfunctional for at least 3 years. And then now you get rid of Valverde, which up to a point you can sort of think, well, ruthlessness when you start to have doubts maybe is a sign of of good leadership, that you don't just sort of hang around collecting the trophies you've stopped caring about. You do sort of take the action you need to kick on to the next level. But you've got to have some kind of plan. Maybe ring up Xavi before you sack Valverde, or ring up Ronald Koeman, rather than turn to poor third choice Quique Setien, who comes in barely even as a placeholder and essentially seems to have no authority at all in a dysfunctional squad where nobody seems to get on with anybody anymore. The players who do get on with each other are all sort of 35. I mean, there's no way Barcelona can win the Champions League this season. They'll probably go through this tie, but the midfield just does not function. And we've seen them again and again and again get ripped apart. Juve ripped them apart, Roma ripped them apart, Liverpool ripped them apart. Even Chelsea, that game at Stamford Bridge, when they drew 1-1, did they, in that first leg? Chelsea ripped them apart through midfield. They're very lucky to get away with a 1-1 draw 2 years ago. The midfield cannot win a Champions League. Put the midfield right. Stop faffing around with the coach.
I mean, you mentioned the coach. I mean, for people who haven't seen Setien's Barcelona, how does it deviate from the previous iterations of this side?
Oh, I think they do hold the ball a bit better. There's clearly a more overtly Cruyffian focus, which is obviously what Barcelona are aiming at. I mean, Valverde was an assistant coach, wasn't he, under Cruyff in the late 80s? Or did he play in that team? Anyway, he was part of that setup. So he has got Cruyffian heritage. But Setien is an out-and-out Cruyff disciple. But they just don't press well enough. And to be honest, I don't think you can press well. This is the problem. The midfield is dysfunctional because of personnel and because of organisation. But one of the reasons for that is that Messi now creates a massive problem for them. That while he remains probably the best footballer in the world, and while he is the person who has papered over cracks for the last 2 or 3 years, you have to make accommodations for him, because he cannot lead the press as he used to 10 years ago. But it's very hard to do that when he's playing alongside tubby Luis Suarez, who essentially can't run anymore. And one of the reasons they brought Griezmann in was that Griezmann is that sort of athlete forward who maybe could do that. And yet you're asking him to play on the left, which he's not particularly comfortable with. He needs to play through the middle or play on the right, but obviously Messi plays on the right and Suarez plays through the middle. So again, you sort of think, what was the process of management that led to that signing? What was the decision making that was gone through? And if you decide to sign Griezmann, you have to also then decide to sell Suarez. The two together, or you just Suarez becomes the backup. But clearly the relationship between him and Messi is so strong that becomes very difficult. So everything there, from boardroom to coach to the dynamic of a squad, is totally dysfunctional.
Martin, any more positive words for Barcelona, or do you agree that this is maybe there for the taking for Napoli?
I'm not sure it's there for the taking for Napoli.
Just to be clear, I didn't say that either.
No, that's true. That's fair. I was more saying, I put words in your mouth there. I'll take it back and just say, are you similarly negative, let's say, about this Barcelona side and what they can achieve in the Champions League this season?
Yeah, I think you can't not be. And like Jonathan says, it's a really, I guess it's a similar case in a way to Ronaldo, where Messi is obviously far and away their best individual player, but is he blocking progress at the club? That is becoming more and more of a question, I guess. I think one of the things that you look at, and it seems really basic, but Barcelona created so many chances for all their passing. They created so many chances. They knew when to make that pass, that killer pass. I'm not sure, besides Messi, that's there anymore in the team. Their shots, their basic shots per game figures have fallen year on year for 4 years now. They're down to 13 shots per game, which is incredibly low. It's 33rd in Europe's top 5 leagues, which ranks below Southampton, Freiburg, Lecce, but they're still 4th for goals, and that's because of Messi. So it's one of those. It's sort of a vicious circle. And they're still fourth for goals, not just because of Messi's goals, but because of Messi's assists. So he 20 plus goals and 20 plus assists is incredible, but it just shows how much he's carrying that team. And when that decision will be made to transfer some of that reliance onto other players and whether they're actually good enough. So yeah, based on how Barcelona have spent money over the last 3 or 4 years, when Messi leaves, it's really tough to see what happens there, to see if they can sustain any sort of dominance, and it will all be through obviously their philosophy that they'll do that. But they've still been reliant on star players, and when Messi goes, and Suarez, like Jonathan says, is past his peak, still good for goals, but past his peak for sure. Griezmann hasn't really worked out, and that's again probably a positional issue. But yeah, there's big problems there. But again, it's one of those where I think they'll win the game this time. But again, whether they go beyond that point is a question mark. I think Napoli are an interesting team, so we'll see.
Barcelona have to pick up the phone and call the Solihull Messi, I think, don't they? But when he's done. Yeah. But when you mentioned Napoli are an interesting team, elaborate on that for us, for anybody. How have they got on in Serie A since the break?
So they've been hit and miss really in that order. Obviously, they won the Coppa Italia, albeit courtesy of two draws and a penalty shootout victory over Juventus in the final. And they rode that high for a little bit. Got some good wins with a loss against Atalanta in there, I believe, but that's no embarrassment anymore. But since then, they've sort of picked up draws, defeats every now and again. Under Gattuso, they've definitely improved, but they still lose far too many games, even more than they did before him, to be honest. Which maybe you wouldn't expect from Gattuso, the player. He should set them up defensively very strong. They haven't been that this season. This has probably been Kalidou Koulibaly's worst season for a while, even though he's not been bad. But they've lost 12 games this season, 8 under Gattuso since he was appointed, having only lost 14 games over the previous 3 seasons combined. So they're losing far too many games. But there's goals throughout the squad, which makes them an interesting team. But by the same token, they're missing that goal scorer that they've had in the past, that Cavani, Higuain, Mertens, when he had that incredible season. He's been missing recently for injury. I'm not 100% sure on his status for this game, but it's clear that they're missing an out-and-out goal scorer. Their last 9 goals have all been scored by different players, and you can see that as a positive. But yeah, they're hard to call. But I just feel like this will be too far for them.
Jonathan, how do you see the game playing out on the night?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Napoli had been going to go through, they had to win the game. But back in São Paulo, and then they probably should have won that game as well. They restricted Barca enough, so I think it's probably. I mean, unfortunately, I think probably not going to be that exciting. I think 2-0 Barca, something like that. I'd be looking at Barca to win and under 2.5.
I think the issue with Napoli for goals, like I said, where they don't have that out-and-out goal scorer, they still create a lot of chances, and I see them creating some chances in this game. They've had the 3rd most shots in Europe's top 5 leagues, but they're outside the top 20 for goals. So there's a big issue there in terms of conversion rate, and I think that's what will cost them in this game. Barcelona
and under 2.5 is 4-1, which is Jonathan's tip there, 7-2 elsewhere. But now we're going to move on. We're not going to preview the first few quarterfinals, the first 2 quarterfinals, just because we might hopefully be doing some content before those games once we know the full lineup. But we'll touch on it just now because we're going to run through the winner market, the outright. And Bayern Munich, I said Manchester City were the favourites. I was just about wrong. Most firms have Bayern and City as joint favourites. But if you look at the best prices, which you can find on oddschecker, Bayern Munich is 7-2 and Manchester City just a tick bigger at 15-4. PSG with the benefit, so the apparent benefit of their draw are 11-2, Atleti 9-1, Atalanta 10-1, Barcelona 11-1, Leipzig 15-1, Juve 18-1. So, and Madrid 25-1. So what we said, even though Juventus and Barcelona both both odds on to go through this weekend, they are both double-figure prices to win, which echoes what you've both been saying about the issues that they've got at those clubs. But just talking about the other side of the draw, PSG, Atleti, Atalanta and Leipzig, all kind of in that top group. There's been a lot of talk about PSG and how this is surely their year, given the side of the draw that they are in. Is it as easy as it looks? Is it, or Martin, as you've alluded to, Atalanta, certainly no pushovers. Atleti, as ever in this competition, and Leipzig as well, the young pretenders who have bundles of ambition in this competition.
So I think, Atalanta are the team. They're the team that everyone's wanting to watch, and they're a team that can pose PSG massive problems. They can pose any team massive problems. They're just an incredible team to watch. You seem to be able to put any forward in that team, and they'll just start scoring goals at a whim. Basically, they've Ilicic, Zapata, Malinovsky recently, Luis Muriel's record, especially off the bench, is remarkable. So, given PSG's propensity to absolutely collapse defensively, you definitely can't bet against Atalanta, and I think most people will certainly be cheering them on to go even further. I don't see huge value in PSG in the outright market for sure, even though they are unquestionably on the sort of better side of the draw. And I think that market will obviously fluctuate massively after this round of second legs.
Jonathan, who do you think represents the value at the moment to win the whole thing?
I don't know if they represent value because it's, but I think Bayern are legitimate favourites. I think the way they've improved since Hansi Flick took over has been incredibly impressive. I sort of, I'm starting to loathe to place them in the same camp as Juve, of sort of you're winning the league despite having a sort of transitional season, because they have been so good since Hansi Flick took over. But it is kind of incredible that they've walked away with the Bundesliga in the end, despite, did they get beat 5-1 by Eintracht Frankfurt? The awful start to the season, and despite that, they can still wander away with the league title. But they have been genuinely really good in the Hansi Flick. So both those things are true. They are now really good. They were really bad, and it still feels wrong to me. They should have won the league so easily. But I think they are the most complete of the sides. And the PSG's problem, and I guess it's an aspect of the same issue that I keep coming back to. We have no idea what they're like against good teams because we never see them against good teams. And that's why they collapse, of course, because they're not used to it. So there is nobody in France who plays remotely like Atalanta. I mean, arguably there's nobody in Europe who plays remotely like Atalanta. But a team who will really come at them, who will press them, who will attack them from all angles, who are kind of, they go into games sort of thinking, well, if we let in two, we're okay with that. And we really don't know how PSG will react. And the way they have reacted to pressure in the past is to sort of panic a bit and get petulant. And if that happens, they're in big trouble. But I mean, I think the fascination of this whole mini tournament is it's not two legs. We don't know how this plays out. We don't know what could happen here. So it's entirely conceivable that over the course of 10 days, and you see it even in World Cups, a team can have a 10-day, 2-week run where they suddenly everything just clicks and they play brilliant football. Now, in a World Cup over 5 weeks, they tend to dip away again before the end. But here, it's 3 matches. And I think that is a huge advantage for a team like Atalanta, who maybe in more normal circumstances, they would get a bit of altitude sickness. I think you almost saw with Ajax in the second half of the second leg of the semi-final last season. Even Tottenham in the final, that they suddenly get to a point at which they look around and go, hang on, what are we doing here? Well, in Lisbon, everybody's going to be going, what are we doing here? So I think that gives them a slight edge on what they normally have. I think it's a real shame for Leipzig that they've lost Timo Werner. I think that's a disgrace that that's been allowed to happen. I think if they'd had him, they would a genuine shout, because I think they've played some excellent football at times this season. I thought they were brilliant against Tottenham. But without Werner, then it's obviously a diminished side. And that shouldn't have been allowed to happen, and it's a disgrace it has been. So I think Bayern are favourites. I'm sort of excited by Atalanta, but I fear too many people are excited by Atalanta. So that's also not value. I think City's glass jaw is so pronounced that you can't really favour them. And so I end up coming back to Bayern, but reluctantly, because I think they are a little bit short.
Interesting. Martin, where are you seeing the value?
I'd struggle to disagree with Jonathan in terms of, again, Bayern being the sort of deserved favourites. It's difficult to see beyond them. I think most of these sort of European powerhouses of the last sort of 10 years are possibly regressing, and Bayern maybe had that regression, but now they certainly look back to their best. They won every single game post-lockdown, which is pretty incredible, given that title race actually looked pretty interesting pre-lockdown, and it was disappointing, again, coming back to Leipzig, that they just drew too many games, really. I thought they were the shout to sort of put up a real fight to Bayern. So yeah, Bayern are the form team, and I'd say that they're definitely the deserved favourites. If I was looking for value, I know we've both sort of backed against them for this week, but if you're looking for value, just a value bet, maybe put a tenner on it. 25-1 on Real Madrid is massive. Like we said, that game will be tight. So if they were able to get through that game, those odds, half, if not more than that. Mm. So yeah, 25-1 is the value in the market, in my opinion. But at the same time, that's a value bet rather than a tip, because I don't think they'll win it. But
all tips have got to be value, Martin. That's the way we work through oddschecker. You know that.
It's true. So in that case, buy another value.
I'm going to weigh in. I think that Atleti, given that I agree with everything said about PSG, that Jonathan's mentioned about how they seem to struggle against the better sides because they're not used to it, and there's got to be a mental fragility there as well, given what's happened over the last couple of years. I'm looking at that side of the jaw, thinking somebody's going to have a chance to get through here, and given that Werner is no longer at Leipzig, and given what we know about Simeone's Atleti and their ability to manage games of this nature, I think that the way that the tournament is going to be, it being just one game, will suit them as well. So at 9-1. I'm saying that is the one.
And they have been much improved since we came back, haven't they? So I think that's probably fair. Yeah.
Good. Glad that got the seal of honour, the seal of approval. Sure, it won't be so good.
Wish I said it because it's good.
This is a Champions League preview, but we are also just quickly going to touch on the Europa League as well, because we've got a couple of English sides at the top end of the market. I'll quickly run through the Europa League winner market, where Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Manchester United are the 11-4 favourites, but they are as short as 15-8 to win the whole competition in places. Inter Milan 6-1, Bayer Leverkusen 13-2, Sevilla 17-2, Wolves 17-2, 16-1 Bar. Let's talk about Manchester United, Jonathan, because I have been, if anyone's unlucky enough to follow me on Twitter, I've been pretty vocal about my thoughts on their manager, but the general, as a tactician, but the general thinking seems to be, since lockdown and since Bruno Fernandes has come in, everything seems to have clicked for them, and they are now ready to be a force under Solskjaer. Although the last couple of days, I've seen a few stats pieces and certainly some quotes from Jose Mourinho claiming the hype around Bruno maybe isn't quite as justified as people think. But what do you make of this Manchester United side in this current guise?
Yeah, I was also very down on Solskjaer, and I remain pretty down on him. I can't really see United getting in the top two at the moment with Solskjaer as a manager. And I guess to an extent it depends what their immediate ambitions are. If they want somebody to be a sort of very loyal custodian who will play the young players and sort of help develop Greenwood and Rashford's obviously slightly older, but still on the development curve. People like Brandon Williams, then maybe he's not the worst option. Although when you have Mauricio Pochettino sitting there without a job, I think that's a difficult proposition to maintain. And there almost seems to be a sense of, well, you can't sack Ole when he's got us in the Champions League. And I think that ruthlessness I was talking about at Barcelona and Juve and suggesting it perhaps being slightly misapplied, maybe United could do with some of that. But yeah, I can't remember any signing ever having quite such an impact as Bruno Fernandes has had. And I think the stats that maybe don't quite tell the full story with him, because he suddenly made a squad that looked totally incoherent make sense. So it's a bit like, you know, when you have Google Translate on your phone. I didn't know this worked. I went to Russia for the World Cup, and you can like hold your camera up over like a bit of text,
Yeah.
and suddenly it all goes into like words you understand. And that's kind of what's happened with Bruno Fernandes is the Google Translate of the Manchester United squad. And they've got lucky, I think, with the way the crisis has altered the market. So looks like Pogba now will stay. That they managed to get kind of, you know, 7, 8 games, how many it was out of him, which they wouldn't otherwise have got. And so you can see his relationship with Fernandes looks really good. And with the 3 very quick forwards, that seems to work very well. But we did see, I think, in the last 5 games. So there was the draw against Southampton, the win over Palace, which is a terrible game with 2 great goals, the draw against West Ham, the defeat to Chelsea in the cup, and then the pretty scratchy win over Leicester. They looked absolutely exhausted. Now, obviously, they have a couple of weeks to recover, but also I think that exposes one of Solskjaer's flaws as a manager. That okay. In the circumstances, maybe it's not the worst thing to do to take a gamble on. This is my first team; they're playing well. Just keep them going, squeeze everything out of them because we're only talking about 6 weeks of football. But equally, that might have cost them the FA Cup by doing that. One of your jobs as a manager is occasionally to play not 100% but 95% to rest 2 or 3 players so that you can retain a 95% level and not dip to 80%. And I think he's failed with that. I guess from his point of view, gambles work as they are in the Champions League, and they do have this crack at a trophy. And he has shown at times a great capacity to manage games. I think the PSG game in his first season, that second leg, he did a very smart thing of reading the emotion of a game, killing it after half time, and then having a pop in the last 10, 15 minutes. And sure enough, PSG showed that brittleness that we were talking about when we were talking about PSG earlier. And they got a bit lucky with the VAR handball, but still, it worked. And even if it hadn't worked, you'd have been able to say, look, they had 2 or 3 decent chances in the last 5, 10 minutes. So in terms of managing games, I think he can, he's fine with that. What I do worry about is how good is he at organising an attack against teams who sit deep and defend well against them. I mean, I'm not sure how relevant that is to the Europa League, but in terms of him as a manager going forward, I think that could be a problem. So yeah, I'm still not 100% sold on Solskjaer, but that doesn't mean that United aren't worthy favourites for the competition.
It's interesting you mentioned as well the managing the squad dilemma, because I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that they played Palace the game before the Chelsea FA Cup game, and he made 2 substitutions in the whole match, despite the fact they were 2-0 up and coasting. It just seems very naive thing to do, not to just kind of take your players out of the firing line and get them fit and rested. Martin, moving on from United, unless you have anything you're desperate to say. I mean, they're playing against LASK after beating them 5-0, so this first game at least, will be a formality. But some other decent sides in the competition, certainly. I mean, Inter at 6-1. Leverkusen, as I said, 13-2, and Sevilla at 17-2. Is it fair that United are so short in amongst that company?
No, I don't see the sense in that gap from United as favourites to Inter in particular, who are a very good side. And if we come back to the Solskjaer debate, a tactical battle up against Antonio Conte will be a tough one for him. I'm not sure many people would have Solskjaer as the winner in that one, but that remains to be seen. But I think Inter are good odds, and I think, like you said, Leverkusen, Sevilla, both very capable. I even think Wolves a decent price. They're a very hard team to beat. They look tired. They do look tired. I think that's the issue with Wolves, and that's so forgivable. They've been playing for about 24 months straight, it seems. So yeah, they look tired, and that's what goes against Wolves, because I think they would be a good price otherwise. But yeah, there's teams in there that are as good as Manchester United, in my opinion. I think the issue, like you say, is that next game into Getafe, which is a very, very difficult game. So if they come through that, I certainly don't see them being any different to Manchester United in this tournament, and then the price changes dramatically. And obviously, I think obviously the Lukaku Manchester United thing is a narrative that will play if that were ever to happen. But yeah, I see Inter as the value if you're looking for an outright. That would be my tip for that. But I agree with Jonathan that Manchester United, as things stand, are the sort of worthy favourites for the time being.
I think, yeah, and just with Wolves as well, it's worth pointing out that they have the added incentive of trying to get into the Champions League, which is massive, whereas Manchester United, having secured third position, no longer have that need to do so. That brings us to the end of the oddschecker Champions League preview, where we also, in passing, covered the Europa League. Thank you very much to both Martin Laurence and to Jonathan Wilson for joining us today. And before we let you go, just want to point you in the direction again of the oddschecker app. If you're listening to this podcast or watching this video, it's clearly because you have an interest in the Champions League and in gambling. And if that is the case, then you need to download that, because it's where you get all the best prices, the best bookie offers, the best free bets, and also the best tipsters, including the guys at WhoScored. And make sure you do go to WhoScored for all of your stats and analysis around all these games, cracking previews as well for every single one of them. So between oddschecker and WhoScored, we have you covered for the Champions League. So do enjoy the games, and please gamble responsibly.